Thanks everybody for joining our webinar, a webinar in our reply series of webinars, and this is focused on enabling Copilot adoption. So what we are going to cover today, first we are going to, of course, introduce ourselves. Then we're going to go ahead and look at a quick overview of Microsoft 365 Copilot. We're going to look at all of the different Copilots, how they stack up against each other, and we're going to talk through some things that you may have seen before, but just as a reminder of what exactly Microsoft 365 Copilot is and what we're going to be talking about today. Then we're going to get really to the meat of our webinar today, which is why adoption change management, focused all on adopting Copilot. We're then going to look at a few key adoption pillars for Copilot success. Caitlin's going to walk us through getting started with Copilot. And then we are going to open it up for time for questions. So if you do have a question, you can utilize that chat function in our webinar today, but we are also going to have a dedicated Q&A time towards the end of our session. So if you want to come off of mute towards the end of our session, feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you and we'll go through kind of a open forum of Q&A towards the end of our session. We also are recording today's session. So if anything you want to go back, something that you missed, maybe you had to jump out a little bit early or you jumped in a little bit late, we are recording this session as well. So a quick introduction of who we are. I'm Tim Evans. I'm an adoption change management consultant at Valorum. I'm joined by Caitlin Kelly. Caitlin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Tim. Like Tim, I'm part of our adoption change management practice here. Both Tim and I really specialize in Microsoft 365 Copilot, come with a lot of experience working with organizations of all industries and sizes. So really excited to be talking all about adoption here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks for filibustering. I had a frog in my throat there for a second. So, all right. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our Copilot webinar series. If this is your first one joining, we actually have a lineup of 4 different Copilot webinars. The previous ones that have already taken place have been recorded. I believe we'll be running these back for 2025. But just a reminder of what our webinar series has looked like. We've talked about AI in the modern workplace, which is really this foray or this introduction to AI as well as Copilot in the modern workplace. We then brought in some Valorum security experts to talk about information and security protection when it comes to Copilot or generative AI. This one's all focused on enabling Microsoft 365 Copilot adoption. And then we have one coming up in, let's call it the middle or maybe early part of December, which is Microsoft 365 Copilot extensibility. In that webinar, we're going to think about how you can use Microsoft 365 Copilot beyond your current applications, using graph connectors, things like plugins, to really use generative AI in everything you touch in terms of your daily tech stack. So real quick, just an introduction of who we are as a company. We are Valorum Reply. We're part of the Reply network of consultancies. We've got quite a few different consultancies that are all focused on different technologies. But here at Valorum, we are Microsoft focused, and we are really focused on, and we pride ourselves on delivering exceptional modern work tools, security, and Azure services. Because of this partnership with Microsoft, we've actually been lucky enough to adopt and get our hands on Copilot really early on. We've been a part of the early access and the jumpstart programs for Copilots. We're absolutely excited about Copilot. We're learning every day as Copilot continues to see updates, advancements as well. And Caitlin and myself work with a lot of customers and clients on implementing Copilot and thinking about strategic adoption of the tool as well. So we're really excited about this webinar. We're really excited about Copilot, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to listen to us speak. All right, so a real quick review of Microsoft 365 Copilot at this very kind of high level. So when we think about Microsoft's Copilot lineup, we've got four different Copilots or SKUs across the board here. Copilot Personal, Copilot Work, Microsoft 365 Copilot, and then Copilot for Sales, Service, and Finance. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today falls in this fourth column, which is Microsoft 365 Copilot, formerly known as Copilot for M365. But if we start over on this left side, Personal Copilot, what was formerly known as Bing Chat, is powered by GPT-4, OpenAI's most capable and most up-to-date generative AI model. When we think about how Copilot actually works, this is what gives Copilot the ability to reason over the data and come up with a logical response. All of the Copilots offer AI-powered capability. This one specifically here is focused on AI-powered web search and answers to your specific questions. Now, if we move on over to Copilot for Work, we add in commercial data protection into the fold. This is that paid Copilot Pro that doesn't necessarily touch your Microsoft 365 applications, but it does give you this sense of commercial data protection. I also want to pause on this idea that when Copilot responds to your prompt, it also gives you citations of where its responses are coming from. So if you are using this Copilot Personal or Copilot Work, and it's searching the web for you as a research tool, it is going to cite exactly where it is pulling this information. Then as we go into the main spotlight of today, Microsoft 365 Copilot, this is where we bring in enterprise security, privacy, and compliance. We also then bring in your Microsoft 365 graph, which we have a visual to kind of look at here in a moment. But essentially, the graph is your content and the context that is delivered to Copilot to make it all the more powerful. You also have Microsoft 365 Copilot in all of your different applications. So no matter which tool you're working within your day, you are supported by Copilot, bringing this M365 Copilot into the fold. Finally, what we're not going to talk about so much is Copilot for Sales, Service, and Finance. We might touch on it just a little bit at the end here, but when we think about Copilot for Sales, Service, and Finance, these are tools that are specific for specific roles. They give you everything that you have access to in Microsoft 365 Copilot, but it also can plug into Dynamics 365, Salesforce, the sales version, and D365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Zendesk, and all of those other tools. So when we think about becoming really specific with our generative AI tools, Copilot for Sales, Service, and Finance can really nail down the use cases that your organization's specific departments might have. So as promised, looking at our visual here that really shows the infrastructure of Copilot, of course, or albeit at 30,000 feet. So if we start here in the upper left-hand corner, and maybe I'll pull on a laser pointer just to get a little fancy. I saw Caitlin's eyes light up. That's, nobody's ever used a laser pointer before. But thinking about the infrastructure here, you can ask Copilot to create a file based on a project plan and maybe that file lives in Teams, right? What it's going to do is going to send that and pre-process, or what we call grounding, which is Copilot looking through your data and going through the Microsoft graph here to give your prompt some context, content, and start generating or building an answer to your prompt. Then from there, it goes over to our large language model, further generating that response, formulating it into natural language, and then ultimately sending it back within your prompt pane to answer the prompt that you have asked within Copilot. Importantly, I do want to point out our M365 service boundary. The dotted line around our infrastructure or visual here is letting us know that anything that we prompt within M365 Copilot is not used to train the large language models. We have full control of Copilot within our infrastructure when it comes to Microsoft 365 Copilot. We have, as we mentioned before, security and data compliance, and we have our service boundary here that wraps around our kind of infrastructure. So let's look at our next slide, and I'm going to take the laser pointer off because it was getting in my way. So importantly, we've thought about Microsoft 365 Copilot, but now let's think about how we use generative AI at work. So if we think about it, employees are currently utilizing AI. It's a new way of working, but we are seeing adoption across industries and across really the tools. So we've noticed that across the past few years, employees have been struggling with too many meetings, too many action items, not being able to maybe find files or emails to complete those action items, and really thinking about it at the end of the day, not having the energy or brain power to tackle the tasks that they need to do or really become creative in their workspace. With this kind of data that we have on the screen, the 2024 Work Trend Index, it came out and showed that 75% of people are utilizing AI at work, and ultimately almost about doubled or half of them have started using it less than 6 months ago. So adoption rates for AI are really above and beyond what we've seen with all previous technology. People are taking these tools, they're adopting to them quickly, and they are changing the game. And that's why we are so excited about Microsoft 365 Copilot. But when we look at our next slide here, there is a bit of another side to those statistics. So of those 3 out of 4 people who started using AI at work, 78% of them are bringing in their own AI tool. Not to mention really the security risks that brings, but we can think about where organizations are missing this strategic input or strategic guidance of Copilot. So 78% of those folks using AI at work are using it on their own, don't have the guidance, and again, are probably raising alarm bells when it comes to security and governance. Additionally, we've seen that 52% of employees are reluctant to admit that they are using AI for their important tasks, and 53% of those using AI at work worry that using it on those important tasks make them look replaceable. So I think the key here and what we're going to talk about today is a strategic approach to implementing Copilot. We can see that folks are wanting generative AI. They are wanting Microsoft 365 Copilot. But when we look at that stat over there on the left, what that really tells me is folks don't necessarily know where to go, and leadership has a big opportunity here to invest in a tool and create strategic messaging around implementation so that you can kind of be on the forefront of implementing generative AI as well as controlling how generative AI is used within the organization. So thinking about why Copilot and those benefits of Copilot investment, the easiest benefit really to understand is this efficiency across the board when it comes to end user capability. Thinking about end users feeling comfortable to explore where AI can assist or improve individual efficiencies. I mentioned a little bit about those alarm bells that come along with BYO AI, and that's that data protection. So thinking about that other benefit of Copilot investment is the fact that Copilot is secure. It puts users at ease to know that their data isn't being used to train the large language model, and it isn't leaving that Microsoft service boundary. And then finally, when we think about future phases of Copilot, this idea of built-in integration. Not only do you have this ability to improve productivity by using Copilot in all of the M365 applications, but we saw in a maybe foreshadowing for a future webinar, we have the ability to extend Copilot beyond those M365 applications. So at the end of the day, we know that employees are overworked. They're interested in generative AI, but there might be a missing piece here to really see the effects across the organization. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass it over to Caitlin to chat about adoption change management and talk about, some solutions to those problems.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah, so much information about really why we need to start capitalizing on AI, but that's kind of one half of the equation, right? We need to understand how we capitalize on it. And when it comes to new tools and technology, it has incredible potential, really transformative potential. But we've seen also firsthand that it requires key adoption initiatives to be successful. And as humans, speaking to artificial intelligence is often not innate. It's really something we have to teach and train to understand to truly change our ways of working. So to frame our discussion of enabling Copilot adoption, I don't want to really shy away from the cost to start with. So, baseline, it's $30 per user per month. So when you're purchasing Copilot, you need to make sure that you realize the benefits are at a minimum equal to your investment. So if we frame it, in the sense of someone who makes $60,000 a year, the sort of worth it equation means that they need to save at least an hour per month. And what we know about Copilot and what a lot of studies have been showing is that it saves a lot more time than just an hour per month. But we tend to get really focused on this idea of how much time are we saving, which is a really great way to start our measurement process. But again, it's only part of the discussion. The next questions become, what does that time saved mean in terms of cost for the business? And then ultimately, how does that time savings relate to key business objectives or KPIs? So if I go back to that 2024 Work Trend Index that Tim was talking about earlier, it did show that 79% of leaders agree that their companies do need to adopt AI to stay competitive, but 59% of those leaders worry about how we quantify the productivity gains. And so time saved, right? A great measure of a certain level of success, but it's really only a single layer of what Copilot can do. And as I mentioned before, right, people tend to save a lot more time than just an hour a month. But maximizing the benefits and aligning generative AI with those organizational objectives really falls down to a core facet here. Will your employees embrace and adopt a completely new way of working? So that's where we need to do a whole lot more than just tell people Copilot's coming and essentially flip on the license and let them have at it. We really need thorough change management. And so change management is the intersection of people, process, and technology. And at Reply, Tim and I focus on adoption change management, which further zeroes in on the individual end user's journey through this change. And what's really great is that this strategy rooted in ProSize methodology is adaptable to all kinds of technology changes, but it's really one that you need to invest in, especially for Copilot. ACM, as adoption change management is known for short in the biz, is what we call the people side of change. So we're really aiming to bridge that gap between someone's current ways of working and a new, maybe more digital way of working. And as I mentioned before, right, it works across all processes. So whether we're moving from something manual to digital or modifying our ways of working to meet new technology head on, like with Copilot, embracing change is really hard. And I even say that as a change manager. So ACM really prepares, equips, and supports users on that individual level to then align and pursue those broader organizational efforts and goals. And what's nice is that it's not just, in theory. In practice, projects with even like fair or so-so change management are 3 times more likely to achieve their business goals. And then projects who have excellent change management are 7 times more likely to meet those goals. So We know that, right, even if we have the baseline of change management in there, we're going to be a lot more likely to hit our targets. And then even beyond those reasons, and probably my favorite reason of all to use excellent change management is that projects that are leveraging change management effectively are 1.4 times more likely to stay on or under budget, which is often a statistics that a lot of leaders like to hear. And so, of course, we're thinking about $30 per user per month. Staying on budget is definitely one key aspect of success for adoption. And then we have individual user rate and satisfaction are all sort of measures that help us understand that ROI. So to help encourage those adoption numbers, we do see that users tend to engage with and believe branded or organization-specific content rather than generic content. And 93% of employees believe that a really well-planned training program affects their engagement. So if we want to reach those really high time save numbers in an efficient manner, we need to drive home specific messages that reach users effectively. Many of you may have run a small pilot group or maybe have been part of the early access program at Microsoft. And we work with a lot of organizations who saw some success and then maybe saw that success or that adoption sort of wane or interest drop off for the majority of users. And now we kind of find them at a point where they need to re-engage and reinvest and really try to get folks back up and running. But when you've had that drop off, it can be really, really hard. So keeping in mind all of these organization specific, the alignment of your key messages to end users with those broader organizational goals are going to have a really major impact. So when we think about how we reach that success, right, we understand that we need change management. It's super beneficial. We saw the reasons why. We know that things need to get really specific within our organizations, but there's still several key challenges that we need to make sure we're addressing to ensure successful adoption. So the first one is going to be technical readiness. So ensuring your system under the hood is secure, compliant, and really ready to go. Another aspect is about messaging AI. So how are we communicating about AI and Copilot so that people are excited and engaged, that we are allaying any fears, or really importantly, that people aren't feeling overwhelmed because they had a misconception of what natural language processing and predictive language is really designed to do. And of course, we have our user adoption. How do we prepare users to dive in and use the tool? I will let you know, it tends to take longer than you think compared to other tools. And then how do we sustain that innovation? So the full value of Copilot comes from experimenting and learning over time. Right? How do we not only sustain adoption through the project, but also continue that innovation, especially for a tool that is constantly evolving? So to help address those questions and those challenges, again, our approach is rooted in the ProSci methodology, which is really a quantitative and qualitative approach to people and change. Obviously, we would love to work with you for your rollout, whatever size, but if you are doing this on your own, here are some key approaches that can really support in your success. So focusing on these pillars, we've got campaigns and training, right? So managing the message, setting expectations of the tool, creating training, and enabling really sort of this self-service space, right, for learning. We want people to attend trainings, but then continue to use it beyond those hour-long sessions. We've also got building a champion network. So you really cannot underestimate the value of influencers within your own organization that are going to share passion and cascade really vital messages. And I always say that the call that comes from inside the house is always going to be so much more powerful. Finding out that someone in your marketing team is using Copilot in a really fantastic way, ignites a little bit of, ooh, I don't want to miss out on that, whether that's rooted in a bit of FOMO, a bit of jealousy, or a bit of excitement, whatever that emotion is, we want to capitalize on that so that everyone's using Copilot. And then, of course, we need to make sure we're measuring ongoing success. So by planning our goals and our metrics, we are so much more likely to hit them, and we're more likely to understand how we continue to hit them over time. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Tim to talk about that first pillar for campaign and training.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about campaign and training here. One second, another frog in my throat. I'm going to just blame the Chicago weather, just constantly keeping me on my toes and keeping my sinuses running for their life. All right, so managing the message. So first, when we think about communication and campaigning, the first aspect really is this idea of managing the message. There are a ton of anxieties or maybe myths that need to be myth busted that really float around about AI. So ideas that it's so efficient that it'll replace your job, or potentially that it'll replace you, or ideas that maybe on the other end of the spectrum that it's a little too inefficient, that it's actually going to take more time to review outputs or correct mistakes. But really, when we think about those anxieties or myths, they all come from that same common fear that technology is fundamentally changing your ways of working. And it really is changing the way in that fundamental way that we're working. But that's why we need to manage this message. And that's why we need, as Caitlin mentioned, adoption change management. So what we want to think about when navigating this space, and I'll click through my graphics here, is forming this campaign and message of an excitement around the change and transformation. Driving excitement is really critical to the success of your implementation. And it really helps you find out what is possible, developing those key use cases and demonstrating value add with Copilot. So controlling and managing that message is really important. We want to think about encouraging exploration and sharing experiences, like Caitlin mentioned, of a colleague, of a key use case, and highlighting those success stories so that we can, again, encourage this nature of curiosity. So ultimately, when we think about managing the message and campaigning Copilot, what we like to think about is that generative AI and Copilot for Microsoft 365, or Microsoft 365 Copilot, is a tool. It's an assistant for us, and it's not that replacement. We need to take the time to make this clear that AI is there to help spark creativity, take away those mundane tasks, take away that time that it takes to catch up from your out of office, right? Think about how AI can help us become more creative and more efficient in doing the things that we love. And that's what we really want to focus that messaging around. So when we focus on the messaging, a lot of the times when Caitlin and I are working with organizations, we're working on focusing the message around a specific pain point. And we've got 3 specific pain points here that I want to bring up on the screen. So the first is this idea of the broken meeting. So when we think about folks in too many meetings, the number one reason employees join a meeting is to receive the information or key information that they need. But if there are too many meetings, we can't be everywhere at once. And when we think about our work trend index, we saw that 58% of employees say it's really difficult to mind map in that virtual meeting. That also kind of plays a part into this idea of coming back from out of office, right? If you're looking to get caught up, that broken meeting might present itself as a challenge from returning from a lovely vacation, and focusing Copilot as an assistant to help you get caught up is really important there. Additionally, we also see that there's this idea of the information labyrinth. There are so many different methods of communication. There's so many different locations that we as organizations stores files in, and many heavy email users end up really spending almost an entire day in their Outlook inbox. So when we think of that information labyrinth, we have a few statistics there as well. We've got from that work trend index, 62% of employees say they spend too much time searching for that information that they need. Finally, this last pain point is centered on this idea of creativity and really the lack thereof, or the inability to start that creative outlook. So when we think about the blank page, if we have folks spending too many times in broken meetings, if we have folks spending too much time rather searching for information, there's really not that time to focus on creativity or innovation. So when we think about that blank page, we can bring Copilot into the fold and help jumpstart that innovation that really helps folks get the work that's important done. So ultimately, when we frame our messaging around Copilot's value around these pain points and helping solve for those modern digital workplace issues, we immediately frame Copilot as this assistant, this value add, rather than a tricky tool that is either too complex or might take too much input or too much time. So we really want to focus that message on Copilot as the assistant. Now, the other side of that communication coin, we can think about training and how training goes hand in hand with communications. Training on a tool like Copilot, as Caitlin mentioned, an ever-evolving tool, can always be difficult. Many of times, and I'm sure this has happened to you, Caitlin, I've been in a training where we've seen a Copilot update that we hadn't planned for. And really, it's a great teaching moment because we like to focus on this idea of curiosity and this idea of testing it out, testing out the new feature that you didn't know was being rolled out to Copilot. So while you can't always stay on top of each one of those little updates, you can really create this idea of try it, curiosity, and having the knowledge of how to utilize Copilot. So when we think about training and we train for the role and the tool specifically, we can set that foundational level of understanding while also setting this expectation for continuous improvement and expectations for utilizing the tool. When we create a knowledge hub or space for users to share testimonials, questions, fun results, that also goes back into managing the message, and that's going to lead to organic discovery. That's really going to accompany maybe a more formal training engagement. So when we talk about training for the role specifically, it's really critical to understand who is using Copilot and how they are using Copilot. When we think about it, really everyone in an organization can leverage Copilot. So what oftentimes Caitlin and I do is understand those specific day-to-days by department. You can see we've got a few key processes here and how we can map Copilot to those day-to-days to create efficiencies and productivity within those specific key processes. So for example, if we want to think about someone who uses PowerPoint every day, they might not actually want to use Copilot in PowerPoint, but if they are maybe struggling with another application, they might be using Copilot in Excel. And then maybe more specifically, if we look at some of our key processes here, we can think about finance using Excel spreadsheets and kind of cutting out some of that time of organizing the data and getting data insights in their Excel spreadsheets. So really what it comes down to is identifying those time-consuming, tongue twister, tasks per the department or role, fleshing out those use cases and driving excitement around adopting Copilot and implementing Copilot into those key processes or use cases. So with that, I'll turn it over to Caitlin to talk a little bit more about the call that comes from inside of the house.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah, so once you've got your message totally managed and you have all of those different ways to engage folks really accurately and enthusiastically, the second pillar was all about building a champion network. So these are folks who can continue to drive enablement beyond the campaign and training. So the first key to leveraging a champion group is identifying, right, what a change network is, what are change champions network, right? All of these are sort of indicative of a very similar group of folks. So ultimately, they are more than just additional users within your group. They're a super key resource that can often be overlooked. So the first thing is identifying critical players or champions who can fill this role as early adopters and liaisons. So to have a really successful change network, we need to look for a group of connected, influential, and representative change champions within an organization. To Tim's last point of all of the different personas that can use Copilot, if we have 10 champions in finance and only one in HR, right? That's a lot to put on that champion in HR. We want to make sure that those groups are the champions are disseminated across your different user populations so that they can gather feedback really effectively. They're used to promote and support adoption through their own personal influence. So it's really important that we're feeding them information, talking points, helping answer questions proactively so that as people know, oh, I have a really great champion for Copilot, I know that I can reach out to them, that they are equipped to support. And it's not that they need to have all of the answers, but we want to make sure that they say, oh, well, I know where you can go to find that answer. And people inherently trust them because of their influence. They also serve as liaisons between the project team and the end user audience. So they're, our little birds, if you will, for any Game of Thrones fans out there who go in and they're able to feed back to the project team and say, hey, there is a lot of confusion about where we're finding more resources. We can then adjust how we're communicating to make sure that those key links to resources are front and center. So that sort of feedback loop is incredibly important to make sure that we're not missing anything. They also tend to be early adopters of new solutions, so we want to make sure that we're gathering folks who are already interested in what new technology might look like for them. It's, another hurdle to add on folks who are maybe a little bit resistant to new technology and tools and then try to upskill them as a champion. Let's lean on folks who have already showed that sort of initiative. And then, of course, they provide that two-way communication channel. So they act as the voice of and to the Change Champions team. So again, kind of going back into that liaison role, we're using them to help disseminate information, and then they're able to come back to us with feedback, what they're hearing from the ground, and then we can iterate and work really in an agile manner to make sure that the project is successful. So when we have a change network, right, why do we even need one? So a lot of great reasons. So one, we can put boots on the ground, making sure that there is change at the individual level. They can also disseminate accurate information to peers through tools like Viva Engage, through word of mouth, through a lot of other opportunities where maybe the project team isn't necessarily as hands-on with. It can also establish a community of knowledgeable change advocates. So if you don't have a change network to begin with and you're launching Copilot, what a great opportunity to establish that. It also helps reduce top-down communication. So we know from ProSci methodology and best practice, certain messages require certain senders, right? For an organization-wide message, you really want that executive sponsor, someone at the C-suite level with really overarching responsibility to send that, to talk about the organization change. But then on an individual level, people want to start hearing from their own people leaders and managers for, what is going to happen to your role? What are we going to do to support you? But then if we only have those two, that's all messaging coming from the top. What we really need is to have some message coming from their level as well. And that's that critical central piece with the change network to help with that communication. And ultimately, they provide support, right? Many of you are working with small, maybe a team of one to try and roll out Copilot, and having a really nice group of champions is really critical to making sure that you also have the support you need to reach a large group of people at once. So when we think about some of the expectations, right? If you say, great, I want to start a change champion network, some people say, great, what am I supposed to get out of this? One, there are a lot of expectations, but a lot of them are really positive. So first, change champions need to understand the need for the change, right? So they need to be able to communicate that to other folks. So they need to understand and communicate, and then they need to engage and support the team. It's hard enough chasing after people all the time to read your messages. We want to make sure that change champions know that if they receive a message with an action, that they are able to take that action. They also need to act as a role model, right? So with Copilot especially, you may get people coming in a bit frustrated. It's important that you have champions that are able to stay positive and say, great, let's troubleshoot this. How can we work through this together in a positive manner? They help monitor the adoption and progress of the team, kind of feed that back to the project team by identifying and escalating those pain points that they're seeing. They can also help support with the resolution of those pain points. So, they're knowledgeable, they know where to go for resources often. They can help point people in the right direction. And at the end of the day, right, it's really important that they maintain a strong network. They're not alone in their efforts as well. So they also have a champion network to lean on, that internal team of dedicated champions who can come and help and support. So these are some of the expectations that we can lay out. It often looks like a lot, but ultimately it's usually them just sort of completing their typical work in their typical attitude and way that led them to be nominated to be a champion, and then just being able to get some really hands-on insight into the project. So we tend to find that most folks are really excited about it. So when we're thinking about what engaging these champions looks like in practice, here are some sample activities we've undertaken with a lot of clients. So there's two sort of camps here. We've got for champions and we've got by champions. So for champions, we do extra bespoke training, right? We have some project sync so they can see the project progress. They have a wonderful community. Often it's either, a private community in Viva Engage, maybe a private channel within a larger team for the Copilot rollout where it's just them. We also provide them what we like to call meetings in a box. So giving them all the materials they need to then go and help other folks. And we give them one-on-one coaching and training as well. So if they want to say, hey, I'm ready to take this to my all hands, can you help me talk about Copilot in an effective way? We're there to help support them with demonstration materials and, prompts to use. And then the by champions, right? So we've got things like making sure they're monitoring questions, and they're bringing those questions to the project team when they can't answer them. We also want to feature them in success stories. So building excitement about the change, illustrating Copilot's use. We also tend to have them monitor office hours or small trainings because people feel more comfortable sometimes asking questions to people within the organization about certain data that they're trying to analyze. And having the champions help spearhead those sessions can be, a lot more eye-opening in terms of how people are using Copilot. And then we also have what we call these prompting sessions. So having little prompt parties or prompt jams so that people can get together, try and figure out some really successful prompts that they can use across their department, across the organization, or even on a personal level. And then it feeds all back up, right? So we talk about those success stories. We publicly praise those prompts or those successes in places like Viva Engage or in Teams or, SharePoint intranet, so that they do have visibility into how they are promoting adoption of a new technology across the organization. So that's all about engaging a champion network. I'm then going to pass it back to Tim to talk about that final pillar of measuring success.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. And thank you all for hanging on the line here for 45 minutes. With this last 10 minutes or so before we open it up to Q&A, we're going to focus on that final pillar, like Caitlin mentioned, measuring success. So when we think about measuring success, we'll click through kind of all of these different options, but we can kind of think about key processes identified for where Copilot could have an impact, making sure users are empowered, create business cases, which we've talked about just a little bit, making sure users understand the bounds and expectations of the tool, managing that perception or managing the messaging, as we talked about a little bit earlier. And then finally, what we're going to focus on is comprehensively measuring the impact and return on investment of Copilot. So this, of course, is going to be the most compelling business case to increase licensing and adoption. Those other pillars, they're great, but at the end of the day, we really need to measure success. And the best way to measure that success is taking a look at impact through qualitative data and ROI using some of our Copilot adoption dashboards. So how exactly do we measure success? We measure Copilot success in three different ways: through sentiment analysis, like I mentioned, the Copilot adoption dashboard, and A/B user testing. So all three of these really allow us to paint a holistic picture of how successful Copilot has been in our adoption campaign or in our implementation. So by leveraging sentiment analysis, dashboards for hard adoption numbers, and also A/B testing, we can really understand how Copilot is being used, how often it's being used, and how users feel about Copilot. And just a little peek behind the curtain, I'm actually doing this with an organization later today. So really keying in on their adoption dashboard and a large survey that we sent out across the organization to understand how Copilot has impacted their business in their, let's say, 5-month implementation and adoption process. Before we actually can get to this process of determining success, we really want to make sure we define goals and the metrics that we're looking to meet. And this is oftentimes something that takes place in what we call our discovery phase. So thinking about active users, a number that we can take from our adoption dashboard, thinking about frequency of usage, again, something that's hard data or hard numbers that we can find in our adoption dashboard. Thinking about time saved, which we really more rely on that sentiment and analysis, self-surveyed information. The quality of output, and then finally, user satisfaction. So additionally, A/B testing is another great way to identify these high-value use cases within your organization. Each business unit, of course, is going to use Copilot slightly differently. And through early identification of those metrics, so thinking about that discovery phase, we can then begin to leverage this idea of A/B testing through our implementation process to go ahead and define those goals and see if we meet those goals. I've talked a little bit about the Copilot adoption dashboard. The Copilot adoption dashboard is available through Viva Insights when you do have or when you do procure those Copilot licenses. So the dashboard can really help you drill down into activity, active user counts, how folks are using Copilot, and how usage compares across different departments within the organization. So again, this is something that I'm analyzing later today, and this information is really, really helpful for, again, breaking down those departments and understanding how Copilot is being used holistically, but also specifically for specific departments within your organization. It's also privacy protected for end users. So once we understand those trends, we can monitor or even alter our strategy based on those trends to boost adoption in other places, or at least think about different ways that we can interact with end users. So ultimately, when we leverage sentiment, A/B testing, and our Copilot adoption dashboard, we can really paint the picture. Going back to something Caitlin had mentioned earlier, that return on investment more often than not outweighs the cost of Copilot, and we really want to, make sure that we're meeting our numbers through these different 3 phases of measuring success. So thinking about what we've covered today, we've covered campaigning and training, we've covered building a champion network, and just briefly there, we talked about measuring ongoing success. All are three key pillars to adopting Microsoft 365 Copilot, and all kind of come into the fold when we think about rolling out M365 Copilot for an organization. So thinking about how to go ahead and get started, I'll pass it over to Caitlin to kind of focus on that.
Awesome, thank you. So yes, we've thrown a lot at you over these 50 minutes in terms of how we best enable adoption. And of course, again, if you are going it solo, you can take all these tips and start implementing them into a really comprehensive change plan. But if you are looking for a partner to sort of help you in your Copilot journey, no matter where you are, please know that you can always reach out to us to help you take that next step. So a lot of times it all starts with foundational understanding of your organization to make sure that, we tailor those messages like we saw before, right? Making sure we're driving home the message in a way that really reaches users and engages with them. Copilot's really nothing but opportunity, but if you aren't able to drive that excitement and create a culture of curiosity around the technology, it might hinder your long-term success and sort of these visions of a wider rollout. So it's really important to start considering where you may need help from a partner. And of course, where you are at in your organization, right? As I mentioned before, some of you may have run a pilot and been on the EAP and now sort of looking to re-engage with your licenses. Some may say, hey, we've had these 300 licenses and they've been used and now we're ready to go on to a full large scale adoption. Or maybe you identified a few pillars where you might need to leverage Copilot Studio or Graph connectors or plugins. All of those are things that we have incredible experience with. And just to sort of give, a quick overview, right? No matter your organization, no matter the size, no matter the industry, right? Copilot can really help you, just as it helped all of those different personas and departments in an individual organization. So whether you're looking to launch 8 to 10,000 licenses at once and create a really comprehensive platform, whether you're looking for just engaging that high-touch champion program for a small, maybe 300 user cohort, or whether you're looking to develop a custom AI solution to, support your own internal processes. All of this is possible through Copilot and working with a partner like us. So just to briefly cover, what we covered, right? So we talked about what Copilot is, how it works with your ecosystem, the value in investing in adoption change management, the adoption pillars that really drive success, and then of course, how we can help you get started if you are looking for that assistance. Before we get to Q&A, I do have a quick favor to ask. So Valorum Reply is able to offer sessions like this free of charge as a part of a program called the Microsoft Cloud Accelerator Program for partners to offer, do more with Microsoft briefing events like this one. So in order to show Microsoft our work, we do need attendees from our sessions to fill out a form that just confirms attendance. It's pretty much like a registration form. So you can use the link or the QR code on the screen. And when you open, you'll just, use your email address and company name you used to register for the event and just confirm your identity as an attendee today. So you may encounter questions about your tenant ID, but, assuming, right, I don't know about you, but I don't really keep all of that handy. You can use a company URL instead. And then you may be asked to identify which, briefing you attended. So today's is just a Get Copilot Ready briefing. And we appreciate your time to be able to take a few minutes to help us continue to offer these sessions, again, free of charge, and making sure that we're able to support users really across the board here. So keep that QR code up there, but just want to check in and see if there was anything from the chat or any questions that you might have now. Thank you, Tim, for dropping in that link in the chat as well. We'll hang out for a few more minutes, but getting toward the end here, Tim, I'll hand it over.
Yeah, really. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for attendance and participation. We hope to see you in our upcoming webinars. We've got the QR codes there on the screen as well. We didn't mention at the beginning, we also have monthly Copilot newsroom. I think it's concluded here for the year, but we are returning it in 2025, and that's all dedicated to feature updates within Copilot. So those QR codes are on the screen. As Caitlin mentioned a few times, we're always here to help. So feel free to reach out to either Caitlin, myself, or marketing.valorum@reply.com. And we hope to see you soon. That Microsoft 365 Copilot extension webinar is going to have a familiar voice. So if you enjoyed this session, please come back. But that's all for today. I'll kind of check in on the chat, or we can go ahead and close up. Rachel, if there's anything that you wanted to cover before we close on.
No, I think that's it. Looks like a quiet Q&A. So thanks everybody for joining, and yeah, please feel free to join us for future events.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.